We're busy with a series called Wise at Heart. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been speaking about not only the wisdom of the head, but the wisdom of the heart, right? And it's been interesting to even see how the online community has been responding to this idea of 512 City Church. And by the way, the kids are welcome to head out with Oscar, as they've already done. Thanks, guys. Yeah, they don't need me anymore, right? But we've been in this conversation about being wise at heart, and it's been interesting to see the online community respond to this idea of not just the wisdom of the head, but the wisdom of the heart, right? What does it mean to be wise in our hearts? And we started off by speaking about how Solomon might have had wisdom of the head, but David had wisdom of the heart, and how David lived out this incredible emotional intelligence, as we coined it, and how this influences our lives. Last week, Sarah Joe shared with us how to go through suffering and how God is able to equip us to better go through suffering. Now, today, I'm going to speak about little things, because if you look at David's life, then there's this theme of the little things that goes throughout his life. And we're actually going to look at a couple of points of how the little things sets us up for big differences. I believe God wants to do a great thing in your life, but that great thing, that great idea, that big plan that God has in mind for you is going to start with some little things that you're going to journey through. And sometimes we miss out on the big things because we miss it in the little things. And if we can deal better with the little things, we'll live more in the big things. And I think God has big things in mind for us. He has great ideas, great purpose, great destiny for us, but it starts with the little things. There's a British author, Doris Lessing, which made a statement. She said, "Small things amuse a small mind," okay? And I just assumed that that's a statement that everybody knows, because in the Commonwealth, in the old British colonies, everybody knows it. But then I started testing it with some Americans and no one knew it, okay? So there's a world out there that knows the saying, "Small things amuse small minds." It's a lovely saying, because you get to insult somebody all the time with it, because whenever they're busy with something small, you go, small things amuse small minds, right? But here's the interesting thing, is I think God is amused by small things. I think God is into the small things. And in fact, Jesus says just that in Luke 16, verse 10, when he says, "If you're faithful in the little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you're dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities." Our ability to be faithful in little sets us up for greatness. And if we're not faithful in the little, we can't be faithful in the much. And if you look at David's journey, God consistently focuses on the little things. So we're going to have a couple of little lessons from the life of David today. And we're going to look at lessons on the little things from the life of David and what he can teach us, and how these little things in David's life actually makes a big difference in his life. So the first thing is, little things are first. And it actually starts out right at the beginning that God speaks to the prophet Samuel, and he sends the prophet Samuel to go and anoint David, right? So he goes to David's house to go anoint him as king. And when he gets to David's dad's, Jesse's house, he's looking for this king that he's supposed to anoint. And Jesse had all these amazing sons walk around, right? He had all these amazing boys walk around, and he had the sons, and Samuel would look at the first one and he would say, "Surely this one is the king." And then he would come by and God would say, "No, not that one." And then, "Surely this one." Now, I know what it's like to have great sons, okay? I get it, man. I've got some amazing boys. I'll tell you what, it's very interesting these days. Walking anywhere in public with these boys is making a racket, man. It is a tough life right now, okay? Because the girls are like swooning left, right, and center. And I'm just like, listen, calm down, okay? So I don't know. The pitch just goes up when they speak for some reason. I don't know why that is, but the reality is that I know all about this, having impressive young men. So here comes Samuel. He comes to Jesse's house. He sees these impressive young men. He goes, "Surely this is the new king." And God says no. And then he looks at the next one and he says, "Surely this one is the new king." And he says no. And he keeps going. And eventually he's through 7 of the kids. And each of them, they look impressive. They look the part. And God says, "Not that one." So after the 7 sons, he's kind of like, okay, now what? So he speaks to Jesse. He says, listen, Jesse, surely you've got another one. And here's the answer. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 11. Then Samuel asked, are these all of your sons? There is still the youngest, Jesse replies, but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down to eat until he arrives. Now, just a note again, there was 7 teenagers in the story just before. Not sitting down to eat is a big deal, okay? So I'm just putting it out there for you guys, okay? This was a big statement right here if you missed it. But he basically says, go find the one in the field that's watching the sheep. Now, what you've got to understand is that watching the sheep, being a shepherd, was a little thing. It was the least of the least given to the youngest. It was the littlest of the chores that was given around the house. It was the least that was seen to be with the sheep. So when he says, listen, there's still one out there, he's kind of going, I didn't even bother calling this one to be anointed as king. When you came to my house and you said you want to anoint the next king of Israel is here my house, this one wasn't even consideration. He wasn't even on the list of possibilities, right? So when David gets called within the context of being little. He gets called within the context of being least. He gets called within the context of being left out, and he's left out of the conversation, but then God comes and God anoints him as king, and actually God sets him up to be the next king of Israel. But here's the important part, is when David gets anointed as king, so just put this in context for a little bit, okay? He gets the crown, right? So we were watching America's Got Talent a while ago, okay, as a family. And we're making our way through America's Got Talent. And this one lady that sang on America's Got Talent this last season, she told the story of how she started singing in Target. She works at Target and she just started singing, and now she's on America's Got Talent and people are recognizing her and everything. But here's the thing. She's on America's Got Talent. She's on national television, but she goes back to Target to go and work. David did the same thing, okay? The prophet comes, he says, you're the next king of Israel. You're the guy. God has chosen you to lead this nation. He essentially gets put and said, you are the next king of Israel. What does David do? Tell his brothers to start serving him, and you guys go watch the sheep. I've got more important things. No, that's not David, right? David understands the little things, and what does he do? He goes back to serving. He goes back to serving his dad, and he goes back to the sheep. In fact, when we get to the next little thing story, you'll find that that's still where he's at. The difference here is significant, because the difference is to Saul, which is the previous king, which is the king that lost the heart of God when Samuel was told to go and anoint David as the next king. And here's the thing, is he missed it, okay? Now, I wish we had time for the story, but God speaks to the King Saul, and he tells him to go and get rid of the Amalekites. The Amalekites were a nation that God promised to wipe out, because when Israel was actually taking the promised land, they were opposing them, and there's a long story. But then what Saul does is he's supposed to go get rid of them. He doesn't. He keeps the best of the lamb. He keeps the best of the sheep. He keeps the best of the cattle. He keeps all of those things that he was supposed to destroy. And then the prophet Samuel comes to Saul. He says, Saul, what's this that I hear? I hear some blaring of sheep. I hear some mooing of cows. And you did not do what God told you to do, which was to get rid of this. And Saul's like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's an offering to God. And then in 1 Samuel 15:17, it says, Samuel says to him this thing. He says this. He says, when you were little in your own eyes, were you not the head of the tribes of Israel? And I think it's so significant that God actually speaks to Saul. And he says, Saul, when you were still little in your own eyes, you were the head. You were the king of this nation. But in that moment, because he wasn't little in his own eyes anymore, God moved away from him, and he went and anointed one that was little in his own eyes, little enough to go back to watching the sheep. Understanding how God uses little things to bring us to great things starts with understanding that we need to remain little in our own eyes. And I'm not talking about being inferior. I'm not talking about looking down upon yourself or thinking badly of yourself. I'm talking about understanding that God is God and I am not. about understanding that God is great and amazing. But I am not God. I am not CEO of my own life. God is CEO of my universe. God is CEO of the life. God is the one that is worthy to be praised. And keeping ourselves in perspective that I exist to serve Him. That's where the story starts. The second little lesson from David is that we get to practice on the little things. And it's interesting how this theme of little things continue in the life of David, because just the very next chapter, chapter 17, the Israelites are fighting against the Philistines, and as Israel is fighting against the Philistines have this one particular head of their army, right? This one particular champion, he's called Goliath, and you've heard the story, right? When I said Goliath, you meant I know that one. So Goliath was coming out every day, and he was challenging the armies of God. I'm going to get rid of you. Who's willing to fight me? And basically the context was what they called one-on-one combat. So rather than, you've seen the movies how these two groups of people would just, kind of spears and sticks and swords and shields, and they would just run at one another, and it would just be carnage. So to prevent the carnage, they would say, rather than all of us trying to chop off everybody else's heads, what if we just had two guys try and chop off one another's heads, and we'll just all go with the winner, right? It sounds like a good plan. I don't know about you. If I was one of the guys there, I'd go, this is a good plan. The two of you figure this out. We'll go with whoever wins, okay? So basically, this is what's happening. But the guy that the Philistines are putting forward, this guy called Goliath, he's such a Goliath that they're looking at him and they're saying, we're not going to fight this guy, right? He's too big, he's too strong, he's too good. And then all of Israel's army is too afraid to fight him. And David, watching the sheep, is asked by his dad to go and take some food to his brothers. He's not sent there to go and fight. He's just sent there to take food to his brothers. And he goes from tending the sheep with the food to his brothers. He hears Goliath. He hears him saying what he's going to do. And he goes, this is dumb. I'll fight him. And I can just imagine his brothers be like, what? How are you going to fight him? And eventually, David is so insistent, and he keeps telling people that he wants to fight Goliath, that they say, okay, well, you've got to go speak to King Saul. So they put him in front of King Saul. And this is his answer in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 33. It says, don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight the Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from his mouth. If an animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do this to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. We often read the story of David and Goliath, and we use it as an example to say, well, this was the impossible, right? It's an impossibility for David, the underdog, to defeat Goliath, the champion. But you know what the David and Goliath story actually is? It's the story of somebody that understood the faithfulness of God in the little things that set him up for the big thing that God had in mind for him. See, because when David was fighting Goliath, it wasn't his first giant. It wasn't his first challenge. It wasn't the first thing. Now, I'm sure that Goliath was scary, but I've seen a lion in real life. And I want to tell you that a lion is a scary thing. So when David came to this point, he was saying, hey, God has been faithful. God has done great things. God has been doing these things, and He's set me up. He's given me faith that the God that has done this is the God that can do this. And I want to tell you, sometimes we struggle with the giants in our lives because we haven't sat down and made a moment to fight the lions and the bears that He had for us. And it takes those little things, it takes fighting those little battles to set us up for the big battles that God has in mind. It takes doing the little things, being obedient in those moments that sets us up for the big moments when God's setting us up to do the impossible. It's because we've done all these little bits of obedience. actually the context of Jesus. Remember I read you that verse that Jesus said, be faithful in the little and, before you can be trusted with much. Well, the beauty of that verse, it's one of the many times that Jesus is speaking about money, okay? And I'm always careful speaking about money because people go like, money in the church, we can speak money everywhere except in the church. I want to tell you that money is just a thing that's a part of life, okay? So let's not make it a God, it's just a thing. But Jesus is speaking about this thing, and he's saying this thing, if you don't deal with this thing correctly in the little, it'll get you when you try and do the most. That verse actually ends with him saying that, you cannot serve two masters. You either serve the one or the other. But the context Jesus is using is he's speaking about people that would say this about money. They say, one day when I have a lot of money, I'll give some money. Right? One day when I have a lot of money, then I'll be really, really faithful. But right now I have a little money, so I don't need to be faithful with the little money. And what Jesus is saying, if you're not faithful in the little, you're never going to be faithful in a lot. It's as simple as that. If you can't be faithful in giving and obeying God in the little, you won't have a lot because the little sets you up for the lot. Okay, the lions and the bears sets us up for the Goliath. And how are we being faithful in the little to set us up in the much, right? What are we sowing in the little to establish the patterns so that we could be ready in the much? I've found it so interesting. I meet so many people that tell me when for some reason when you're speaking about giving, they always feel like they need to tell me, I'm not giving at the moment, but it's because I'm waiting for this thing, or I'm waiting for that amount, or I'm waiting for this. And you just know that doesn't happen, because if you're not doing it in the little, you're not going to do it in a lot. The life you have is not the results of what you're sowing in the moment. The life you have is the results of what you've sown before. And those seeds grow in what you have at the moment. So it starts with the little, and the little causes the great things. And we've got to understand that there's this pattern, that when we're faithful in the little, it sets us up for the much. But when we're unfaithful in the little, we're not going to have anything to go with in the much. We want to do great things for God. Is it just me? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you want to live a boring life and have no consequence and have no influence nor legacy and just survive through life. That's okay if that's you. I don't get it, but I'm sure there's some people. The rest of us, we want to live a life that counts. We've been given some hours on this planet, and we want to make those hours count, right? My life is going to be lived in eternity. I have some hours on this earth, but this earth hours, I'm going to do everything I can to make as much of a difference as I possibly can with, right? Now, if I want to live a big life, if I want to make a big difference, it doesn't start with doing big things. It starts by doing the right small things. And as I sow the right small things, it sets me up for the big things that God has in mind for me. And I know that some of us have been waiting for the big thing, and we've stopped sowing in the little things. And I want to tell you that not doing the little things is messing you up for those big things. And maybe this morning is meant to be a wake-up call for you. Maybe this morning is meant to be a moment where you get arrested again and challenged again to trust God to come and do in you and through you the big things that He has in mind. Maybe it's time for you again to take on some lions and some bears to set you up for those Goliaths. And there's little things that God wants us to do to set us up for the big things. The third lesson we learn from the life of David is that little mistakes have big impact. It's interesting, you find in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, you find the story where it says, it happened in the spring of that year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David and Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was beautiful to behold. It's an interesting story because it starts out with a very little thing. The little thing is that it was the time when the king was supposed to be at war, right? That's the first line of this verse. It says, in the season when the king was supposed to be at war, David wasn't at war, he stayed in Jerusalem. right? So it starts off with a little thing, a little out of position, a little off course, a little out of place. And because David is a little out of place, he ends up being a lot out of place, because what he would end up doing, if you were to continue to read this chapter, what David would end up doing is he ends up not only sleeping with Bathsheba, who isn't his wife, but he ends up killing her husband in an effort to conceal the fact that he slept with her. Okay, so that's what follows. It's a big mess, okay? It's a massive mess. And I want to tell you, when we get to big messes, God has great ways of getting us out of them. And we're going to speak about that a little more next week as we continue with the series. But for right now, what you need to understand is you've got to get that David made a big mistake. But David's big mistake didn't start with a big decision. It doesn't say that it was the time when the kings were supposed to go to war, but David has had enough and he decided to blow up his own life. He has decided to press the self-destruct button on his kingship. No, that's not what he decided to do. All he decided to do was to do a little thing, okay? He just decided to do a little thing, and that's to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's a little thing. But it ends up in a big mistake. Big mistakes start with little decisions, right? And let's follow along, right? So then David goes, he does the little thing of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then he can't sleep at night and he's walking on the roof. No problem with that. That's a good thing to do. But then he sees a woman bathing, right? Another little step is to see the woman bathing. When he sees the woman bathing, he looked away and he decided that he would not look on another man's naked wife and lust after her in the night. And he immediately went, no, that's not what he did. What did he do? He did another little thing. He saw her bathing. He couldn't help himself seeing her bathing. He was just walking on the roof of the house. He sees her bathing. He goes, oh no. And then it says what? It says he saw her bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. Beholding is very different than seeing. Yes? There's a difference between beholding and seeing. Now, I know you guys can't relate to this at all whatsoever. So since you can't relate, let me try and help you a little bit, okay? It is late at night and you can't sleep, and you find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you've got the computer open, and as you're scrolling mindlessly through mindless things, you see a clip which you shouldn't see, which you click on because you saw somebody on social media doing something that was very weird with very little clothes on, and you clicked on it and the picture came up, and as you saw the picture, you beheld. And your beholding caused another click and a search and a this and a that. And before you knew it, you were in trouble. Why? Because you took a lot of little steps. You didn't go out and say, okay, you guys still can't relate. Okay, we'll go back. Okay. So hypothetically speaking, right? You're having a terrible day, okay? And as always, your husband doesn't understand you having a terrible day, but you go off to work. And then as a good wife, you're going to work. And you're going to work to sustain your household. But your husband doesn't get the emotions you're going through. It's okay. You're just going to work. That's just part of it. And then there's this guy colleague that somehow always gets you. And the fact that he's just gone through a divorce just helps him understand you a little better. And you're sure that there's nothing wrong with his innocent request that the two of you go for coffee after work, because he understands you and he gets you. And you make the small little decision to go for a cup of coffee with a guy, and that's not your husband, while you're actually supposed to deal with some things with your husband, but now you're hanging out with this guy that just gets you. He gets you. There's nothing wrong with someone getting me. And then he gets you, and he gets you a little more, and then he got you. Now, you didn't wake up that morning saying, I'm going to have an affair. No, you just woke up and said, oh, this is a bad day, and this guy wants to have coffee with me. This will be all right. You didn't wake up that day and say, I'm going to start descending into the deep, dark hole of perversion that can never satisfy, that can never give me the sexual fulfillment that I'm craving for by going into the emptiness of pornography. No, that wasn't what you were aiming for. You were just taking a couple of little steps, and the little steps got you in big trouble, which is exactly what happened to David. It's 523,400 steps from here to Las Vegas. And I want to tell you, whether you choose to go to Vegas or not, if you take the 2,523,400 steps, you'll end up there. It takes one small step at a time. And we've got to understand that it's the little steps that gets us in big trouble. Nobody has on their New Year's resolutions for 2023, which, by the way, is around the corner. Nobody has on their New Year's resolutions have an affair, get addicted to pornography, and blow up my life. But yet, thousands of people will do exactly that. But it won't be the big things. It'll be the little things that gets them in big trouble. It starts with the little things. What are the little things? What are the little steps that you've taken in the wrong direction? And why has God called you to this moment and this time as a wake-up call for a moment just to say, what steps are you taking that isn't the direction that I have in mind for you? What is the Holy Spirit convicting you of? Because I don't know how many steps you've taken. I don't know how far along down this road you are. But I want to tell you there is a way out. There is a solution. There is a moment in time right now when God is ready to come and shake you up, to bring you to this moment, to come and address the place you're at, and to come and bring you back to the life that He has in mind for you. The big life, the great life, the destiny that He's got in mind for you. And you don't have to live in this place where your little steps has led you to. There is an exit ramp right here. There is a moment of grace and mercy right here today for you in this place. The fourth lesson we learn from the life of David is that sometimes the little things we do is not for us, it's for others. Sometimes God sets us up in the little, with little things that we don't sow for ourselves, we sow for others. And it's a beautiful story towards the end of David's life, 2 Samuel chapter 7. David comes and he says, why should I live in a house while God's presence, the Ark of the Covenant, lives in a tent? I'm going to build God a house. And then the prophet Nathan comes back and he says, sorry, David, you're not going to do that. You're not going to build God a house, but He'll build a house for Himself through your son Solomon, which would be the one that would follow David. And as he says that, David then goes and he makes a decision. And the decision that David goes is he decides to do the little things so that Solomon might do a great thing. And I want you to read with me in 1 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 5. It says, now David said, Solomon, my son, is young and inexperienced, and the house to be built for the Lord must be exceedingly magnificent, famous, and glorious throughout all countries. I will now make preparation for it. So David made abundant preparations before his death. David did the little things so that his son might do amazing things. And I want to tell you, sometimes God has called us to do little things, not so that we could do amazing things, but we do the preparations and someone else brings the fulfillment. And I don't know what it is that God has called you for, but I want to tell you, may your life always be bigger than yourself. May your decisions always entail the generations and the legacy that is to come, the plans and purposes of God for other people's lives. I want to tell you, there are little things that God has called you to do that might be little for you, but it's huge for someone else, because God uses the little to do a lot, because God is able to do that. And what are the little things that God has in mind for you to do that might catalyze a great big thing for someone else? I hope that the little things in David's life has been more than a little thing in yours today. And that as we studied his life and we looked through the little things that he did and the little ways in which God used little things to set up a great life, that you would sense the Holy Spirit doing the same in your life. Whether you're facing a Goliath and you need to remember the lions and the bears that God has been faithful to, or whether you're finding yourself in a space where you're made some little steps in the wrong direction and today is a wake-up call for you, may the life of David come and minister to you. May it remind you. May it make you aware of the fact that God indeed has a great life in mind for you, and He can use the little things to set you up for something great. Archimedes famously made the statement, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. What he was referring to at the time was he was referring to the mechanical or the mathematical discovery that he's made, that if you were to take a lever and you were to use the right leverage, the law of leverage says that you can use a little energy with the right leverage point to make a big difference on the other side. And without getting into the math too much, the law of leverage basically allows us to leverage energy in a magnificent way. And as I was thinking about this, I realized that that's exactly what God has in mind for us. As God is our anchorage. He is the anchor of our souls. He is the one that allows us to position our lives, to anchor our lives. When we're doing the little things in obedience to God, God makes a big difference through our little things by Him becoming the place to stand for us to move the world. May God do exactly that for you today. Lord, I pray that as we come before you today, as we bring our hearts and our lives and our stories, Lord, as we bring our little things to you, God, our little challenges, our bears and our lions, Lord, our big challenges, our Goliaths, Lord, as we bring our own hearts and our own hubris, our own pride before you, our own being big in our own eyes before you, God. Lord, I pray that we will remember who we are. And we will remember, God, that in this life, it's not about the big thing that you have called us as much as it is about the little steps of obedience that we take. So, Lord, I pray that if we've been taking little steps in the wrong direction, that today would be the day that we turn. And Lord, that we will take little steps in the right direction, God. But may we never trust in ourselves to bring about the big effect. God, may we continue to trust in you being the one that is able, the one that sends us on, the one that gives us the leverage to see big things happen through our lives as we take little steps of obedience. Lord, you know the name of every Goliath that people are facing today, Lord, whether they're here in the room or online. Lord, you know what those challenges are. And Lord, I want to pray right now that you, by your Holy Spirit, will come and address it. Will come and stir in our hearts the fact that you are able, God. You are able to bring us back. You are able to restore. You are able to recover. You are able to remind us. You are able to call us in. Lord, and we are able to turn to you. And if you need to turn away from a journey that you've been on, little by little, stepping away from the plan of God, I want to tell you that I'm agreeing with you today. And I'm praying with you today that as you turn, He's going to do exceedingly abundantly above what you can think or imagine. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord has set up for your return to Him. May you be brave and with all of your heart embrace that. And Lord, I want to pray, God, that as we remember who you are, we'll remember what you've done. We remember your goodness. We remember your grace. We remember your forgiveness, God. Lord, today, this day, as we remember who you are and what you have called us to, God, I pray that we will take the next step of obedience into all that you have prepared for us. I pray this in the name of Jesus.